there's somebody who is fighting for you right there that's going to a place that can actually help. There's a lady in the back that I just met. There's people, if you want to really do something and get out and do it, your story is important. Canvassing neighborhoods, going up to places and going, hey, I'm so-and-so. I don't have a dog in this hunt, as my grandpa would used to say. But I know a guy who's doing amazing things for us. And I just want to share my story with you and maybe give this guy a look. So, Dr. Chai, thank you for all you're doing. I think what you're doing is amazing. That's right. Quickly, it was really cool. When I came here, I wasn't planning on making a movie. Marilyn called me and said, hey, this guy is over there doing a lot of soil sampling and a lot of helping. He's getting harassed by officials. He's getting harassed by people that should not be harassing him. He wants me to come, and I'm a little scared. Will you go with me? And I think I'm just hillbilly enough that I was like, sure, why not? We'll go. So one thing that I found was encouraging was you guys were all recording things on your phones. When you went into meetings, you were recording things on your phones. When you were talking to officials, you were recording things on your phones. And I said, I'm going to make a movie on my phone. And Leslie Pacey with Government Accountability Project, who was right there, who is amazing, by the way, what she's doing for you guys. Yes, absolutely. Give her a round of applause. It's incredible. I had never made a movie in her life. And I said, give me your phone. And I set it to what settings I wanted. I turned it sideways. I said, record everything like this. And I made her a filmmaker in like 3 seconds. And so I used a lot of her footage. I used my footage. I used, Chrissy shot me some stuff. Jake got me some stuff. There was tons of people from the community, who helped me make this film, and you didn't even know it. A woman named Barbara Hart, who I dedicate this film to in the back, you guys, at the end of it, you guys don't know her, was a woman who believed in me, and she saw the work that I was doing, and she set me up financially in a place to where I am not beholden to anyone. I see a story and I tell the story the way that I see that story being told. I'm not held accountable to government agencies, to a studio that tells me what I can or cannot make. I make what I see. And what I see is an amazing group of people who are struggling to find answers. And I want to tell you something, you're not alone. In this country, every 2 days we have a chemical accident. Every 2 days. And when you look at what happened and started in the 1940s, I'll wrap it up here, I promise. In the 1940s in Nitro, West Virginia, they have an explosion at the Monsanto plant, right? In 1940s, they started having problems with something called chloracne, and they go on strike, and they're like, and the company's like, hey, we think we've got these problems, we're going to know what's going on. Long story short is this. You're not alone, because this thing keeps happening over and over and over and over again. So, how does it stop? It stops by continuing to be a voice, continuing to film things on your phone to hold people accountable, and it stops when you start putting people in places that can actually speak for you that matter. Okay? So, that's it. I hope you enjoy this film. I worked really hard on it, and some people are not going to like it. If you're having some flashbacks from the events that happened, you may not want to watch this film. I am incredibly grateful to all of you and to Scott Smith, who this film is technically focuses on, but it's about you guys. And I want to thank you for helping me make it. And I want to say, just keep doing your thing and keep fighting. Okay? Thanks, guys. Oh, and it's in low resolution because we had a problem getting high resolution, so it actually looks a little better than this one. But you're going to see a low resolution. But
the initial fire on someone's property, I testified. Just kidding.
Wow. Look at the business.
this lady here, that's Marilyn Leisner, the last mayor of Times Beach, Missouri, a small resort town along the Merrimack River just outside of St. Louis that the government bought out after some jackass contracted with the chemical companies to dispose of their waste. He mixed that chemical waste with oil and sprayed the roads of Times Beach with its mixture. Scott Smith, the guy in the blue shirt, has been to over 60 chemical contamination disasters, and he's brought mail in here to talk with some of the people of East Palestine, Ohio, the site of one of the nastiest, most toxic chemical spills in history. One of its citizen whistleblowers gave me a 1,400-page EPA memo with a list of chemicals that were on board the train when it derailed, that the EPA has now removed from their website. According to their own documents, the EPA knew about multiple sites of chemical contamination for almost 10 years prior to warning the residents of Times Beach. If there's anyone who knows the EPA playbook, it's the guy in the blue shirt.
At Times Beach, the federal and state officials told us when the test results came back that they were under 100 parts per billion. We got their test results, and their test results were 1,200 parts per billion. We gave those test results to an AP reporter, and they published them. We asked them why they lied to us. They said they wanted to prevent people from being damaged economically, physically, psychologically, and socially, and they didn't want riots.
But they already did that to us.
Yeah.
That's who they've done.
They used our lab after telling us there was no lab that could do it. We had already collected some money to test ourselves, and so they used that lab. Our test results came back on December the 13th. Saying the dioxin was there, but we didn't have the money to say what the level was. Their test results came back on December 23rd. On December 23rd, they revealed those results at a Christmas party the residents that were in town had at our community center. And they again said, if you're in town, leave. Don't take nothing with you. If you're out of town, don't come back.
Company that contracted with Norfolk Southern to haul their vinyl chloride showed up on February 4th to monitor the situation. They found and told them that the cars that Norfolk Southern and its contractors were wanting to burn to prevent possible explosion were already cooling and posed no further threat. The EPA would like you to believe that a lone local fire chief made the call to burn the derailed cars. They've repeatedly claimed that they were not involved in that decision. But why? Why wouldn't they be the lead in such a hazardous situation? Why would they rely on the very ones who stood to profit or minimize their liability? I asked the fire chief about this narrative, that he alone made this decision. When I talked to the EPA, and I kind of poked them a little bit, like, hey, who said light this up, like light it on fire? And they told me that you
that I did, of course.
Yes, yeah. Is that true or not?
No. That decision was discussed by the entire Unified Command, everybody in the room, all the stakeholders.
Now, who is Unified Command?
The US EPA, the Ohio EPA, the railroad, Governor DeWine, myself, the EMA, all of the stakeholders and that had
The railroad.
All the people who showed up.
everybody. Ultimately, I have
health effects. The hydrochloric acid is corrosive. You can burn your eyes and skin and lungs as you inhale it. There are several of the products from vinyl chloride that can cause cancer, long-term health effects in the liver, kidney, brain, etc.
Do you mind if I do a little film in here, brother?
Yeah, I don't mind.
You okay? Good. Like, yeah, I don't mind.
I'm not
I don't like seeing myself on camera.
Oh, don't worry about it. You'll just be on a big screen soon. Don't worry about it.
Oh, no, say that. Never had a problem. All of a sudden, I didn't even know about it until my wife saw it. She just happened to walk in the bathroom one day and she said, "What is this on your back?" I have no clue. I can't see it. Well, I went to the doctor and he looked at it and he said, "We got to burn that out. We got to cut that out." And he's going to cut it out and send it away and find out if it's, malignant or not.
But you've never had it before?
Never. No, never. Put the dog up so he doesn't eat up these nice people.
Joe and his wife have been ill, and we know things are in their water. I took their soil samples the other day. So instead of taking a biopsy of their lungs or anybody else feeling ill, the next best thing is a furnace filter to see what they've been exposed to so they can go to a toxicologist, medical doctors. And this is a furnace filter, and there's been no one else doing any furnace filter testing.
Right after the plume of chemicals settled in and blanketed our property, which was the same evening that they blew up those tankers, okay? We were driving home and we saw the plume. We saw like a fog all the way around our house. And we couldn't even roll the windows down in the car to breathe because it would choke us half to death. And so I told her, we can't stay here. We got to leave. And so we left. We stayed away for about 2 weeks, and eventually another 4 weeks. When we came back, we said, we can't really trust the water here. We need to have the water tested. So we talked to Norfolk Southern. They said, go get your test done, and we'll pay for it if you go get the test done. We did. The testing site was not capable of doing a really good test for any possible metabolite as a result of that controlled burn or that detonation of the chemicals. So Norfolk Southern said, we've got people that we can have test your water. I said, okay, I'm good with that. So they sent somebody over to test it. They tested it once. It showed vinyl chloride in the water. They came back again. They tested it a second time. Still there was vinyl chloride in it. We were both having a problem. It's not safe. We shouldn't be drinking it, which we weren't drinking anyway. But we probably shouldn't be washing our dishes or clothes or bathing in it. And they said, oh, it's okay. It's fine. We're fine. So then they sent somebody from Michigan down to talk to us, and literally sent somebody all the way to Michigan just to talk to my wife and I, and she looked at all our results. She had them in front of her. She said, Mrs. Shealy, she said, I looked at your water, it's not that bad, I wouldn't drink it. I said, well, let me ask you a question. If we were your parents, would you tell your parents, if we were your parents, would you tell them it's okay to drink this water, to bathe in it, to cook with it, to do everything else? And she looked at me with a troubled look on her face and she said, buy bottled water, do not drink the water.
And you're going to see me swabbing this twice. One swab is for SVOCs, and the other swab will be sent to lab for dioxins. This is an official protocol to sample what's on the surface. Needless to say, the EPA and Marker are on tape saying all my data is useless on this, and they're pushing back very hard. And we know why. I am looking forward to the EPA because they're tracking people around town. They're looking at Facebook, and the railroad is hiring people to do it. And the EPA is going around, well, you smoke cigarettes in college. Well, you drank too much. It's your lifestyle. So I want to see them come after a past and blame their lifestyle. Good luck. Good luck.
So it might sound like the guy in the blue shirt has been to a few too many chemical disaster areas, that the fumes may have gotten to him.
He's been on the ground at every single major contamination, spill, explosion, accident.
Port of Stockton, California, Laurel, Montana, Santa Monica, California, and Eden, North Carolina, Aruba, Guanas Canal, Charleston, West Virginia.
Just as he's been a fount of knowledge for Select, he's a fount of knowledge for a senator.
The EPA and the railroad following people, monitoring their social media. The Government Accountability Project obtained emails from the EPA that make it not seem so crazy. Why are over 52 EPA agents being copied on the whereabouts of Scott Smith's location and his actions? Why is a woman named Barbara McCree, who, besides having an EPA.gov email address, is basically a ghost, asking for Scott's personal address and information? Why the obsession from a major government agency on a civilian collecting soil and air samples for residents who are being denied help? Why do they need to know his address? Why do they need to know where he's at all times when he's in East Palestine? Why are they following him?
He's asking you if you're taking samples.
Have you taken samples?
I can't answer any of your questions.
You can't. Well, then why should I answer any of your questions?
We need to know who's coming and going on the site.
But this is private property.
here.
You're standing on private property right now.
Everything that I've read in the newspapers and everything I've seen with the health effects of these residents, this is not something that was nothing to see here type event. Scott came in and he countered that narrative that the EPA and Norfolk Southern has been putting forth for so long, that the chemicals of concern are all within acceptable limits, that it's safe to live in the environment, it's safe to go back home. And this is not what residents are experiencing, and this is not what Scott has found out through his results.
Scott is doing testing that people can't get otherwise. The EPA can judge his results and they can judge his methods, and it's the only way he gets any kind of transparency. Whether people agree with what he's doing or not, you need to have things to move the needle on what matters to the people in East Palestine.
I had Michael Regan here in my home, the head of the US EPA. After I brought that to light, that the EPA agent wasn't honest about the testing, well, he acknowledged the chemical gas smell recorded.
Okay.
Sherrod Brown and Bill Johnson, the senator and congressman, they acknowledged the chemical gas smell in my home too.
Did they test the filter the way Scott did?
No.
Nobody
I
did?
didn't even know you could test until Scott did.
Some said like fingernail polish remover with sweet added to it. To me, it was just a straight up burning. And when I say burning, when I came back into town to work, I would lose my voice an hour and a half into my shift. My balance would be off. I would stumble like I was drunk.
And tell us again where you were working. How close were you to the derailment?
I worked at Circle K.
Which is where?
Right on the main street of town. I was in between the railroad tracks and the creek.
Please pass on. We are here in good faith. I'm on the record in the media inviting the EPA and the railroad, specifically Will Burgess that signed the lease, to join me anytime for the benefit of the community to take samples. We would love anybody to join us.
The bigger picture is we want to expose what we've seen as a pattern of regulatory capture of the EPA in these disasters, of the responsible party, and the responsible party hiring its own contractors to do its work and then always coming up with non-detects or detections within, safe limits. It's just not an accurate reading based on the health symptoms and what Scott Smith is finding in his own testing.
All the time we see this. Track removals begun. Lovely, isn't it? They had these aerators placed in front of the tunnel, like right in front of my neighbor's house. I thought these aerators were doing good. Didn't realize that they were gassing everyone more.
How so?
They were lifting the chemical up from the creek and putting it into the air. So it was filling up my neighborhood with that smell. And after that, an EPA officer had told me, EPA agent, yes, had explained to me that those aerators should have never been placed in a residential neighborhood.
This woman is still displaced. Actually, her kids has to stay with her mother because she's staying in a hotel. This is what it came to, is we are dying. We need our kids saved. You'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see the million gallon tanks of contaminated water they have stored. And that's right here. This is all ground zero. That's all contaminated water.
I feel so sorry for these people.
I can't stand to see these kids on the street. It's horrible.
It looks normal.
This community was awesome. That's why I moved here. I got 47 family members in the 1 mile zone that they're considering 1 mile zone. I live next to my best friend since we've been in diapers. It was awesome. I love this place.
But like what I'm saying is I don't understand like what you're worried about because everything's green. It looks beautiful. What's the problem?
Okay. I have a problem with my soil samples coming back positive for formaldehyde. I had my surface testing done. There was a chemical that came back, hexochlorine benzene, that was banned in 1966. Everything that, what is different from here and different than Maui, in my opinion, is that you can see the permanent damage. You can see the deaths. What are we going to have in 5, 10, 15 years that is beautiful here? Who wouldn't want to live here? Quiet. Everybody gets a lot,
But like like I said, it's beautiful. What made you even want to think about getting your soil sampled?
Because I knew something was wrong when my fiance was getting sores and blisters all over her bodies. When we had burning eyes, headaches, sore throats. I found 2 nodules on my tongue, or on my lungs. My liver enzymes went sky high. I tested positive first time for the metabolite for vinyl chloride. Then I started going to the creeks helping to film. And so I went and got another blood and urine test. It came back with the metabolite for vinyl chloride and benzene. The test results that came back from our creek so happens to have benzene in it. Everything that they're saying is not true.
What does it mean to have this guy here doing this for you?
Listen, this man is, I'm going to call him a savior for this community because we cannot get any testing done besides this man. Universities just came in and did a little bit of testing, but we still ain't even got the results back from the universities yet.
You're getting his back, but you're not getting the universities?
Yes, we're not getting the universities back.
This is a hexane solvent, so anything that's on there will be coming right off. I'm even doing the back of it, even though I don't have to.
Well, the thing is the EPA's not testing.
And the thing is they accuse me of doing everything that they probably are doing. And you heard today a soil sample from 4 feet down.
The EPA refuses to test our soil or our air in our homes. Refuses. We are not, and he'll say it right to your face, we are not testing your soil or your air.
I always hand the resident this, so everything is documented, and you'll see me filling out a chain of custody tomorrow where I reference the timestamp and the geotag and where I am. And right now I'm taking a soil sample. See how I'm taking it? Is the dust particles settled? They're not going to go much below a quarter, half inch. So if I want to game the system and get a false non-detect, I'm going to core 4 feet down.
So you send this to the same place that the EPA gets there as far as an EPA?
Well, yeah, the Eurofins, the EPA approved lab, and the EPA, that's a great question. When I've repeatedly invited the EPA publicly to test side by side and media asked them questions, the EPA said there's no need to test side by side with Scott Smith because he's using an EPA certified lab and we believe the lab results. What they question is my methodology, meaning why I'm sampling, where I'm sampling. And as you can see from the press release with the Government Accountability Project last week, I said, my work plan is simple. EPA refuses to test for a resident. Resident is reporting health symptoms. They call me, I test their property. That's my work plan. That's my methodology.
I can smell that.
You can smell the soil?
I can smell the soil.
Yeah, I can smell it too.
Wow.
This sounds like a really weird question, but do you get a weird taste in your mouth when you get over here?
Oh, it's a metally metallic?
Yeah, I'm tasting it. I'm tasting that, and I'm thinking I'm getting paranoid, but...
The back of my nose, my throat is on fire right now.
Now, why do you test for SVOCs versus VOCs for these?
Well, VOCs are the volatile organic compounds.
Uh-huh.
And those dissipate, they're already going to be in the air. So the key is the surfaces.
Okay.
It's like the air you breathe, going into the atmosphere. And at a murder scene, I'm basically testing for the blood that is sticking to the wall. This is like a murder scene.
Tell me about the chemical pneumonia that you experienced in your nosebleeds recently.
Yeah, I've been in the creek, which is why I say the third event is excavation could be worse than the first two, where I went back and I had chemical pneumonia. And then I came back the following week and did a lot of soil sampling and had nosebleeds that couldn't be stopped.
Scott Smith, he might not be an engineer, but he does have degrees from Baylor and Harvard, and he does have like 25 patents. He's the only guy smart enough to be out there testing the topsoil and looking in people's furnace. This environmental Avenger thing doesn't work out. He's always got a career in HVAC.
The EPA might question Scott's methods, but I have questions about theirs. Like, why were air monitoring systems set up during the burn, grouped and placed in large part upwind from the plume? Why do they continuously deny that they were, in fact, involved in the decision to light the fire after being presented with evidence that the tanks were cooling and at no risk of explosion? It's hard to believe anything that Unified Command says while they hold the hands of the railroad and seem to be intentionally and strategically determined to produce not detects.
Why don't we deserve to be protected? Why don't we deserve to know what's in our food? Why don't we deserve to know scientifically through data, through health risk assessment, exactly what people are exposed to daily? Why? This is not the end, it's only the beginning. You will start telling the truth.
You saw Dr. Rick Chai last night at the town hall and all that with the reporter Rich McHugh from News Nation. Those are water samples from all that.
What's the difference between the top shelf and the bottom shelf?
Top shelf are furnace filter, and the middle shelf are soil samples, and the bottom is water.
So when you get those samples back, do you report them to the resident?
Yep, I go right to the residents.
Okay.
To put this into context, a lot of these samplers that they take all these samples in teams of 4 to 6 people, and I'm just one person. And the whole process is I methodically set up the chain of custody, refrigerate everything, methodically set this up. Sometimes this will take 2 to 3 hours to write this up properly, go to FedEx.
You don't charge these people anything for this, do you?
No.
How much have you spent so far in?
Close to $100,000.
In testing?
Close to $100,000. And I had commitments from people to help with no conditions, and they all reneged on me. Lawyers have not reached out to test properly, so I've told the lawyers I'm not in the business of enriching lawyers. The community I do for free. So I'm just hoping to recover my out-of-pocket costs because I came here for 2 trips. As you heard me tell the story, Ken Beresford, who was on the second trip, said, you got to come back. And he passed away recently. And he said, you got to come back. And you've given me hope for humanity. And I said the same thing to him. So I'm in all the way now. So if people around me make promises and renege and don't want to step up and help, I have no choice to move forward. I'll figure it out.
So what happens now? Historically speaking, attorneys swoop in and sign up residents into some large class action lawsuit. They then reach a settlement, of which the attorneys take a gigantic portion of. The offender carries on with unchecked business as usual, while the citizens are left with crumbs and lingering questions about their health and their future. East Palestine and its residents have a chance to be different. They are engaged in ways that give me hope. They are recording and documenting interactions on their phones and showing up to meetings to hold politicians and agencies accountable. Dr. Rick Chai, the chiropractor who wrote prescriptions for blood work when residents were denied by their healthcare providers, and the same guy who still walks the creeks exposing lingering contamination, is now running for Congress. They have allies in their fight to bring meaningful change. They have the information, the technology, the community of their friends and family. And they also have the guy in the blue shirt.
Hi folks, my name is Tom Devine. I'm the legal director of the Government Accountability Project. GAP is a whistleblower support organization. So we're lawyers, so I guess better define the terms. People that we help are citizens. We use free speech rights to challenge abuses of power that betray the public trust. That's the folks that we serve. We help them in 4 ways: defending them against retaliation, helping them to make a difference, getting stronger free speech laws to protect them, and sharing our lessons learned. Over the last 45 years, I've been honored to help 8,000 whistleblowers, many who changed the course of history. But I can't think of any greater honor than introducing Scott today. Scott Smith, I don't even really think of him as a human being. I think of him as a phenomenon for the truth. Scott, go for it.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to start by thanking Leslie Pacey, who reached out to me from Government Accountability Project in the support of their legal team. I probably wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for them. I'd also like to thank my scientific team. Now, I am the chosen one on the front lines to take all the full frontal assault from the EPA, the railroad, and the smear and the tax, and even some of the residents from the community that want to play both sides, which is not in the best interest of East Palestine. And to address that, the scientists on my team actually worked for Battelle, and they wrote some of the ASTM dioxin standards. I can't reveal their names, but I will say one name. On March 29th, I got a phone call from Don and said, dioxins are the real issue. I want to support you. And I want to tell you about the great team around me. I don't make a statement. I don't do a PowerPoint without them seeing it. Don is battling cancer. But I believe in giving credit where credit is due, even if I'm going to get in trouble. I won't use his last name. He calls me nonstop. His passion. I wouldn't be able to do this without him. He has literally calls me from having chemotherapy. But, and this team around me is phenomenal. I have an expression, you leave your ego at the door. That would serve a lot of other people well. If you leave your ego at the door, it's just a great, great thing. Also want to, with everything going on, there's a lot of great nonprofits, net tax exempt organizations, but I also want to say that I want to challenge today some of these nonprofits to fund testing. I've done all I can do. I'm trying to do it. And all these plaintiffs' attorneys, there's one attorney, Bill DeBroff, who reached out to me. I want to thank him. He's actually funding resident test results. And if your attorney is not giving you your results or being transparent or helping you test, my suggestion is you need to start asking questions. So with that being said, how do you turn off the middle thing? Why am I here still today? And since I get constantly accused of making things up and lying, so my mother is still alive. It was her birthday yesterday, in fact. So if anybody wants to check out this story, they can. But why am I here? Some people are just born this way. I don't remember this, but I was 4 years old, and that's me. And I was a ring bearer in the wedding, and they were worried about me losing the ring. And I refused to be in the wedding because they didn't trust me, I'm told, unless they gave me the real ring. So they gave me the real ring. So the point is, I was born stubborn. It cost me a lot of money. I planned to come here twice. Now it's 22 trips and 26 rounds of testing. So be it. I will not stop. So a week ago on Friday,
I remember the time. It was 5:40 p.m. and I had received an email from Leslie Pacey, who received an email from Ashley McCollum. And it was a link to buried documents on the EPA website that they never talked about publicly or transparently, but it's there. And that's, that tells the story. So we're gonna go through a timeline. So February 3rd, first event, which you've seen. February 6th, second event. February 17th, it turns out Norfolk Southern, along with the full knowledge of the EPA, was testing for dioxins near ground zero, with detailed testing reports that showed high levels of dioxin TEQ samples, 91.9. And that's key for the other chemicals in the fingerprints too. February 17th, I receive a direct Twitter X message from Courtney Miller. Can you come out here and help us test? I came out what I thought would be 2 trips. February 22nd, I arrive in East Palestine for the first time and I begin testing in and around Sulphur Run. February 22nd, and these are active links for those that want the presentation, a contractor comes out of the woods when I'm testing Sulphur Run. And you're just going to see a video. You saw part of it in the documentary. You'll see another video of it. So I think I now know why, because they were testing on February 17th, and all of a sudden they see this guy in Sulphur Run in waders and pulling water and sediment samples. This is from FOIA documents either received by Leslie Pacey or with what was in that link that we got from Ashley. And this is February 14th. EPA supervisor writes, he acknowledged, meaning Norfolk Southern, they would need to address the remaining contamination in their remediation plan in the future. So just tells a story. That's the source email. Now, everyone says the EPA gives directives to Norfolk Southern. Well, here you have Jackie Cole of Region 5 and Robert Wood of Norfolk Southern. So Norfolk Southern instructs the EPA and other agencies to coordinate with Norfolk Southern and not the Norfolk Southern contractors. Now, I think we've all heard a far different narrative from the EPA in the media. And this is interesting because the EPA is looking for containment locations that we will be following up in more detail with the Government Accountability Project. Now, there is a dioxin expert at the EPA, Brian Gullett. He's never allowed to talk to the media. This comes from an internal EPA email from FOIA. There may be residual dioxin in the ash residues, but I suspect most of what may have been formed was dispersed throughout the area in the plume. We have the ability to sample these plumes using our drone-mounted sampler, but it's too late now, of course. Now, here's where we're going to get into it. Just think about, in my offer, I will go on record again today. I will sit down with Mark Durno, Norfolk Southern, for the benefit of the community. No hard feelings. I can take all the smears and defamation as long as there is a positive outcome for this East Palestine community. So Brian Gullett, the dioxin expert, said even if it rained, it'd be extremely unlikely that they'd be in the soil 6 inches deep. Why is this important? You'll see this. April 20th last year, you see Mark Durno stand up and all these samples getting averaged. So on March 10th, I received the first testing results from Eurofins, confirming elevated levels of dioxins and sulfur run sediment and presence in the water. March 10th, what we know now, we didn't know until January 25th of 2024, the EPA received the testing results back from their dioxin testing. So March 17th, I'm interviewed by Will Kane on the Fox News channel. That's why it's important for this timeline, especially with any media in the room and the media not in the room that is listening to these smears and these false narratives from Norfolk Southern and EPA. March 20th, EPA's Barbara McCree, we still don't even know if she's a real person, multimedia communications at EPA, wrote an email looking for my personal information. Here it is. There's the email, Barbara McCree. And I was told like 3 public information officers were watching, but here's 52 people at the EPA watching every move I make now. If I don't know what I'm doing or anything, I don't know what they're so concerned with, but they're reporting in my locations, whereabouts. March 20th, Mark Durno at the EPA in an internal email appears to begin the nothing to see here narrative. That's after the Fox News thing. That's after they have the results with the 91.9 composite sample TEQ. And the expert team around me, we've been talking about a potential third event, which is the remediation of most of the toxic burn pits after the EPA appears to stop all dioxin testing. We've got test results that suggest that dioxins and other chemicals may have continued to spread with the excavation of the burn pits. Now, May 2nd is the first News Nation story with Rich McHugh. I want to say, I hope ABC, NBC, and Time Magazine are listening, because Rich McHugh, News Nation, and Chris Cuomo are setting the standard. Whatever's going on at these other networks, the other networks aren't really telling the truth. And Rich McHugh, News Nation, Chris Cuomo, and that whole network, I forget everyone else, I don't want to be, are absolutely telling the truth. They're fair and they're representing both sides. So this community owes a big round of thanks for News Nation, again, or I may not be here along with many other people trying to help. See, here's the Mark Durno email. Here's the dioxin reference for background soils. We'll forget about it, but we'll love, it's the Office of Research and Development. So I think my lawyers tell me there are no coincidences. That's why this timeline is very important. The question is, will any media really cover the timeline beyond News Nation? July 24th through 27th, Marilyn Figley, informed, on July 27th, I wrote an email. So Marilyn Figley, who you may have seen on the news, we did the garlic crop testing, which we'll talk about next, tried to set up a meeting. I went to one meeting with Norfolk where we're going to sit down and agree with our detailed test reports, methods, everything in reciprocity. The railroad, Norfolk Southern, and the EPA said, no, we only want to see Scott Smith's details. We're not sharing any details. And I put this in writing. Please understand this is a response to this entire email chain. I remain willing to have an open dialogue and collaboration with Norfolk Southern and or the EPA and or any Norfolk Southern contractors and or anyone involved in the Unified Command Center, but it will be on equal terms with information shared in both directions. And that July 27th email is public. I think it's on the Government Accountability Project website. That's available for all to see. Again, Mark Durno has lied about this. September 25th, Chris Cuomo, News Nation, hosts a town hall with residents. October 4th, EPA concludes no further dioxin tested needing in East Palestine. October 19th, in my driveway, I get served with a lengthy subpoena asking me for all my communications with residents, all my testing, all my communications with media, everything else. Total violation of my constitutional rights. Thank God for Government Accountability Project and my personal attorney We stood up to them. I said, bring it on, file a motion to compel. They still haven't done that. But this timeline, I would love to get cameras in the courtroom and face this. And I may not have enough time to get into it, but plaintiffs' attorneys, Jake Koza and my personal attorney, without talking to each other, said, this is strange. These plaintiffs' attorneys in the class action might be trying to get results. And I'm going to be very clear. I'm not in the business of enriching these class action attorneys. They can reimburse me for my costs. I'm not making money like all these other consultants, and I will put that money back into the community to do more testing. And then on November 25th, the roll of the dice comes out from Huffington Post and Chris D'Angelo, and then that leads to a bunch of censorship, which you see on the Government Accountability website. So now the EPA, the latest narrative with the EPA as this gets out from the press release from Government Accountability Project is that was on-site testing on February 17th and February 9th. And, we were only talking about off-site. Well, that is a comedy show because on-site everything is connected. Taggart Street, where Brushville Hardware supply, East Martin, that's all on site because the plume fallout deposited everywhere. So off-site, in our definition, is where the toxic plume fallout was not. And we went with the experts on my team. There's a little sliver just outside, not far from East Palestine, on Beaver Circle in Columbiana, and the dioxin background there was 1.7 parts per trillion TEQ. Now, these are the FOIA documents from Norfolk Southern. I'm going to go fast through these, but same reports, same lab I use. And that is the chain of custody. They started on February 9th. And they tested water here. So they found vinyl chloride at 290 parts per billion in the water. This community is very smart. You can Google this and look at that. But these are like baseline fingerprint contamination settings. So I want to show you this. So these are the dioxin testing from February 17th. Now, think about on ABC and all the smears coming at me from Mark Durno. Composite testing. The best analogy to this, so composite, they have all these samples of dioxin soil, of testing for dioxin in soil, but they instructed the lab to blend 5 samples together and take a reading. They didn't put out the TEQ. The TEQ was 91.9. So what I did is so this is equivalent, let's say, I get pulled over on a suspected DUI. This is my blood. And picture this, if you're Norfolk Southern, the police officer would say, oh, I'm sorry, you can do your own blood testing. So I call up 4 of my friends that haven't had any drinking, and I take all this stuff and I pour it together and I mix it up. That's a composite sample. And Mark Durno and the EPA, they want to question my methods. I'm going to give a direct challenge to Alex Prescia of ABC. Why don't you cover this? Time magazine will get to them. Why don't you cover this? So the dioxin TEQ is 91.9, and this is the fingerprint, what we call the fingerprint that I've learned from my scientific team. And I'm just going to go over, so here's the chain of custody from February 21st, benzene 55 parts per million, which is 55,000 parts per billion. Vinyl chloride. So this lays everything out. And I am not aware of this ever being talked about or addressed by Mark Durno. And don't buy the on-site, off-site stuff, because the whole town is on-site. Anywhere that plume deposited is on-site. The only thing off-site are the control samples, where the plume was not. So this is behind Courtney Miller's house. This is on February 22nd. Well, little did I know. Now I know. Oh, by the way, Norfolk Southern and the EPA have accused me of making up this video. And again, Mark Durno, EPA, Norfolk Southern, I'll make the video available. It's not, I didn't have an actress do this. That's how desperate they are. You're on private property here.
I'm sorry, I'm just asking you if you're taking samples.
I'm not, just like you refer me to your public information officer, have you taken samples?
I can't answer any of your questions.
You can't. Well, then why should I answer any of your questions? Because of what?
We need to know who's coming and going on this site.
But this is private property.
We're working down here.
You're standing on private property right now.
I'm sorry, but I need to know.
I have to check with my public information officer.
Okay.
You're on private property.
I'm sorry.
The landowner doesn't want you trespassing. So now it took to January 24th, 2024, thanks to Ashley McCollum. I know why they came out of the woods like that. It was really weird because they already knew that they were testing for dioxins. It's right there on the timeline. And then in May, we tested, and this is after, so in February 22nd, the TEQ was 18 in the sediment in the creek. And May 23rd, it increased to 65. This is why me and the scientific team said, Scott, this third event in the remediation is going up. And we still have a lot more testing results coming in, to come in. So, and this is the same version in a bar graph. So it's significantly increased after the remediation, but the EPA stopped all dioxin testing on April 18th, and the remediation cranked up after April 18th. And these are just pellets. The vinyl PVC pellets in soil for VOCs, they tested all of it. And it's all butyl benzene phthalate, butyl acrylate. So you can see this narrative again. These are all, once they knew what they had, it's the chemicals in your home. You're to blame, residents, for your health symptoms. And, benzene, butyl acrylate, 60 parts per million. Benzene is a very concerning chemical, and I hear scientists all the time say there is no safe level of benzene. This goes on and on and on, so I'm just going to scroll through this, but you can see it's over and over again, and these are all the lab tests that were buried on the EPA website. Now here is a video from Mark Durno this is from April 20th.
The modeling also told us that we would not expect to see a high concentration of dioxin compounds, which is the compound that most people have indicated to us that they're concerned about. The primary contaminant that we're looking for are semi-volatile organics, which are common products we would see from a burn. Dioxins, we wouldn't expect to see that, but there was enough interest in that particular chemical that we added that to our soil sampling list. Then there's the dioxins. Again, we sampled for dioxins because you told your elected officials we want this compound tested for. So we added it to our analyte list. Now, as far as the railroad goes, the lab they're using is called Eurofins. They're a very highly reputable lab in the U.S., so I'm not concerned about their choice of laboratories. We're also using a reputable lab. I think we're using PACE, right? Labs out of Pittsburgh and Minneapolis. So yeah, the laboratory quality is high. So again, you can't have enough data to make decisions with. Sir.
Now, this area here, a lot of people grow gardens and things like that. What's your recommendation for doing so this year?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that was actually part of my talking points. I never said anything. Our recommendation is to continue using your properties the way you normally would. We actually just had a meeting with the garden club, one of the garden clubs in the area, Tuesday night, and we had an expert come in, a phytoremediation expert. Phytoremediation is using plants to clean up chemicals. He told us that the chemicals that we're dealing with, if they were a problem, do not readily they do not readily uptake into those plants. So even if we had a problem, he doesn't believe that, you should not garden or farm, okay? That was his piece of advice. Our recommendation to date, because of the analysis that we did, the modeling and analysis that we did, and how we understand the chemistry of the vinyl chloride burn, we don't believe that there was enough dioxin concentration in that smoke to create a problem, okay? The back calculation that we did, it gets to another question one of you guys asked about the modeling. We back calculate, I think you asked it. We did the modeling for the one car the night before the vent and burn. We did an event reconstruction model several weeks later to look back at what the 5-car burn did, plus the observations from our guys on the ground, plus the wind patterns that we looked at from various sources.
So did you hear Mark Durno say you can never have enough data, and I've offered to meet with him? Did you hear that, Time Magazine? Did you hear that, Alex Prescia at ABC? Did you hear that at CBS, Roxanne Severia and Natalie Neves? Did you hear that? You might want to cover that. And then here's an example of my reports, same Eurofins. So he talks about Eurofins, but did you hear Mark Durno? This is an agency that has $12 billion and 17,000 employees, and they're relying on models, and they knew about testing from February 9th and February 17th. Think about that. Think about that. Now, Time Magazine. Time Magazine, the residents' quotes are great in the community, but here is an example of the undue influence and the media just blindly putting the EPA on a pedestal. So there is a picture, and actually that's not even a lab report, that's an EPA spreadsheet table. If there was a picture of me doing that, I would be crucified. And this is right out of the Time Magazine article that came out on February 2nd. Durno's working 16 to 18-hour days to hear this. And I'm going to officially say, because I tell it like it is, shame on Time Magazine for mistrust of the government, this largely conservative community. Shame on them. This is not about politics. That's implying that. So Time Magazine needs to be called out. And this is a video that's 3 minutes long, but this was the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, where me and the scientific team gave a presentation. They didn't know we were there, but they talk about misinformation and disinformation. And at the end, they're asked a question about crop testing. And we relied on our partners. They never tested any crops in East Palestine. They relied on models. And Leslie, this plant expert that the EPA references, we need to find out everything about him. We need to FOIA, what is he paid, and the one that showed up at the community meeting. So Mark Durno says you can't do enough testing, but we're going to do our models. It's okay to eat your crop and eat your garden produce. So we just released this last week, and Kelly Kennedy also has done a great job, local media from out of Cleveland. So Marilyn Figley's TEQ dioxin in garlic is 440. The control sample, which came from Tamara Lynn Fries from a year ago, was 0.81, and her garlic from her garden was 4.5, which, 54,000%. Now, we need more testing. But this is preliminary data. More testing needs to be done. This is better than nothing, and I would like to do a lot more crop testing. And Marilyn Figley's lawyer from the class action refused to turn over results. I get my results to residents as fast as I can. So these plaintiff class action attorneys not giving over results, that I don't know what's up with that. I mean, there are theories out there that they're going to jam down a settlement. All I can say recently, one of my businesses was in a class action. It resulted to a data breach. The lawyers got $5 million in legal fees. Guess what I got? I just got my check for $750. And I'm almost done now. The 63 East Palestine dioxin soil samples so far. So we look at greater than 3 parts per trillion TEQ, 70%, the regional screening level, sometimes residential screening level, is 4.8 PPT. You hear Mark Durham talk about that. So 46% are over that. Now think about this logic. My methods, my quality, 54%, the majority of my samples are good news, nothing to see here in the soil. And we've identified some hot zones. So if I'm using dirty shovels and trying to manipulate all this data it just doesn't make sense. And I got news, I was with the O'Connells last week. The EPA, what did the EPA tell you, Lori? But they also said they wouldn't test your soil because it's close to a roadway? Yeah, right to the roadway. The soil I tested with 3 parts per trillion, it was under the screening level. That's good news. So, I'm actually, in a weird, ironic way, I'm almost limiting the liability of the railroad, but I'm identifying the hot zones. So they're trying to smear me. They're in a weird, ironic way. They're kind of attacking data they don't want to attack. And then the control sample from Beaver Circle, Columbiana, the TEQ was 1.7. And these are our latest February 1st results. So, again, the Norfolk Acatus 91.9. Just remember this composite sampling. This is blended mixture. So more likely than not, there were much higher dioxin results. So there you see a summary of our various results with initials. So the regional screening level, you see, from 379% more to Brushville Hardware Supply at 39,000. So more testing is needed. And this going back to the control samples in Bull Creek where the plume was not for water, baseline dioxin testing, and then we had Sulphur Run. And we have a few more slides here. When it gets to furnace filters, particle sizes, the human eye can only see, I think it's something like 40 microns. And these, you're talking about as low as 2.5. And why this is important, Cristiangelo from Huffington Post originally exposed some of this, but Brian Gullett is a key scientist at the EPA. Why can't anyone talk to him? But this is from a paper he has characterizing emissions and burning plastics. The particulates emitted were 2.5 microns or less. Respiral nature of the dioxins, it shows what you can breathe in. And this is very important here because these MERV filters, you never get a perfect seal. So what I am testing in furnace filters, it's better than nothing. It's what you're not feeling well, you may have been exposed to. The residue I'm identifying is probably 10 to 50, most 80 to 90% flowed right through. Now, this is my last slide, but I also want to say, whoever the resident was that was on Fox Business News with Maria Bartiromo, I apparently used my name. I got a phone call from Lisa and Stephen Hilbert out of Indianapolis, and they immediately called up and paid about $8,000 of lab testing. So get more. So if you're on Facebook, you see Lisa Hilbert, please reach out to her and thank them. They're again, you got, I don't know where all these other tax-exempt organizations, nonprofits are. Government Accountability Project is putting money into this. And I want to say, I want to give a chance. Every passing minute is a chance to turn it all around. Norfolk Southern, no, I'm not, I got thick skin. Mark Durno, let's still sit down on behalf of the community. I'm going to give you the chance to turn it all around. And Pastor Joe Sheely, I ask you tomorrow, don't pray for me. Pray for the whistleblowers that I know want to come out. Pray for Mark Durno. Pray for Norfolk Southern, and pray that they can find it in their hearts to do the right thing and sit down and have a full exchange of data. And with that being said, people know I don't always follow the exact rules. So, Rick Chai, originally called me. I didn't know he was the railroad, sat down and interviewed me. And I'm going to end with this. East Palestine represents everything that's great about the country and everything that needs to be fixed. And all these great people, I thank you because you motivated me. You gave me hope that this country can be fixed. And I want to say, Rick Chai, I don't get into politics or political endorsements. I am fully endorsing Rick Chai. I'm endorsing his character to change. I don't care what he runs on or what. And his story is the American dream with his father and how he came over here. I really can't thank Rick Chai enough for being able to work with him, and it's an honor to know him. And I brought him a little gift because I want to make, after he's elected, the congressman in the blue shirt. So, and it's a great community. So anyway, Rick is scheduled to speak. So now I want to take the opportunity to introduce Mike Shade. Again, Unity Council is not here, so I was asked to send. So I think, the speakers, Mike Shade and Steve Lester, is just two of the top-notch people, and Mike Shade has a great organization.
Great, thank you. Thank you. The mic might help just a little bit. That's going to be hard to follow. So for those of you that may not know me or Toxic Free Future, just a little bit of background first. We are a national nonprofit organization that has been working for 40 years to protect U.S. residents, American families from exposure to dangerous chemicals like dioxins, vinyl chloride, PFAS, phthalates, and many others. We've had the honor and the pleasure of working with grassroots leaders here in East Palestine. Over the last year, we've done a lot of work with the Unity Council. We've done a lot of work with River Valley Organizing in the early days. And one of the first things that we did was to work with other NGOs. We organized a national sign-on letter to EPA last winter calling on EPA to do a much better job in testing for dioxins. We were very concerned about the draft dioxins sampling plan that they had released. I'm not going to go into that. I know Stephen Lester is going to be speaking about some of the concerns with dioxin testing, but I just want to note that we've been working very hard to push EPA to expand their sampling, not only for dioxins, but also chemicals of concern in vapor intrusion and indoor air, because we know there's been not enough indoor testing in people's homes, particularly those that live near Sulphur Creek, that may be impacted by vapor intrusion. My talk is going to be a little different here today, which is really to highlight how East Palestine is really a symptom of a much bigger problem. Unfortunately, our nation's federal chemical regulatory system allows companies like Oxy Vinyls to produce cancer-causing chemicals that we know could be harmful to public health. So in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about how other communities across the United States, such in places like Louisiana and Texas and Kentucky, today are continuing to be exposed to chemicals like vinyl chloride. And I'm also going to be talking about new research that we just published this week, revealing the ongoing risk of shipping vinyl chloride by rail, which happens day in and day out across the country, through Ohio and other communities across the United States. Let me see if I can figure out how to work this thing. Is there a certain button I need to, oh. Sorry, I'm not super tech savvy. Oh. Thank you. Excellent. So, as I mentioned, in the months following the train derailment, we not only were pushing for dioxin sampling, but we also wanted to take a moment to highlight how other communities around the U.S. were being impacted by both the production and the disposal of vinyl chloride and PVC plastic. One of the things that was really interesting to us was that we were seeing states like Texas saying, we don't want the toxic waste from East Palestine to be disposed here. Meanwhile, if you look at data from the US EPA, you will see that Texas is home to more vinyl chloride production facilities and incinerators that burn toxic waste from the plastics industry than almost anywhere else in the country. So we put this report out in April, which is available on our website for free at toxicfreefuture.org, to highlight how other communities across the U.S. are suffering from the production of vinyl chloride and also the disposal. Because as Scott noted, when you burn vinyl chloride, when you burn PVC plastic in incinerators, dangerous dioxins can be released. And we've known this for decades. We've known this going back to Love Canal and even going back to the Vietnam War. So a couple quick factoids. In our research in this report that we put out back in April, we found that across the country there are 19 plants around the country that produce either vinyl chloride or PVC plastic. For those of you that may not be familiar, the number one use of vinyl chloride is to make PVC vinyl plastic. So you can't make PVC plastic without vinyl chloride. So across the U.S. there are 19 factories that produce either vinyl chloride or PVC plastic. Most of these facilities are located in the Gulf South, in places like Louisiana and Texas, but there are other facilities as well in places like Kentucky, Illinois, New Jersey, Niagara Falls, Canada. Across the board, the chemical industry produces between, and this is according to the US EPA, between 10 and 20 billion pounds of vinyl chloride every single year. Let me say that again. The chemical industry produces between 10 and 20 billion pounds of vinyl chloride every year. So if you think about that, who is being impacted that? Absolutely, East Palestine has been severely impacted by the disaster from last year. But at the same time, today, communities around the U.S. are suffering from exposure to the very same chemicals. Our research found that on average, plastics plants in the United States release over 400,000 pounds of vinyl chloride into the air on an annual basis. And you can bet that, unfortunately, that most of these communities are not rich white communities. Most of these communities are lower income communities, communities of color. So this is a major issue of environmental justice and racism. This here is a picture of Formosa Plastics plant in Point Comfort, Texas, which is actually one of the biggest polluters of vinyl chloride in the United States. There's actually been a shrimper woman named Diane Wilson who's been watchdogging this plant for about 30 years. She started getting involved in this facility because she was a shrimper and she was discovering that a lot of the shrimp that she and other fisher folks were trying to harvest, after this company was discharging their toxic waste into the water, many of the shrimp started dying. So in an act of civil disobedience, she actually tried to sink her boat in the bay to prevent the discharge of toxic chemicals. So, and she wrote a really fantastic book, which I recommend checking out, called An Unreasonable Woman. She's an example of a grassroots leader in Texas who's been fighting against vinyl chloride as well as dioxins going back to the 1990s. This here is just a quick snapshot to show who are the biggest polluters of vinyl chloride in the United States. Of course, the company who is shipping vinyl chloride that derailed in East Palestine last year was OxyVinyls. OxyVinyls is the #1 producer of vinyl chloride in the United States, and that's according to their own information. But they're not the only company that produces vinyl chloride and releases vinyl chloride in the U.S. Some of the other biggest producers include Westlake Chemical, Formosa Plastics, Shintech, and Orbia. And this is relevant, which you'll see in a couple of minutes now. Westlake Chemical, they released more than 185,000 pounds of vinyl chloride in 2021, according to data that they reported to the US EPA. Their biggest plant is in Kentucky, in Calvert City, Kentucky, and this past Monday, the US EPA, I know we all don't love the EPA, but the EPA published a report this Monday that found that people that live in the community downwind of this plant in Kentucky face an elevated risk of developing cancer because they live in the community downwind of this plant in Kentucky. And one of the reasons they face elevated cancer risk is because of both ethylene dichloride and vinyl chloride. Ethylene dichloride is the chemical that's used to make vinyl chloride. They even found a greater cancer risk for children who attend an elementary school in the town right near this Westlake Chemical factory. When we put out this report, we also published an interactive map so that folks can understand where are these factories around the U.S. where vinyl chloride is produced, and also where is it disposed of. I encourage you to check this out. You can go to our website, toxicfreefuture.org, and you can actually zoom in to see where these facilities are located, how many pounds of vinyl chloride and toxic waste do these companies produce, and also what are some of the socioeconomic facts. Because as I mentioned, this is a major issue of environmental justice. Most of these plants, I know this may not be so here in East Palestine, but in many cases, most of these plants in the U.S. are located in low-income communities of color, again, making this a major issue of environmental justice and racism. More recently, just this past week, we put out a report to really try to understand, well, how much vinyl chloride is shipped by rail here in the United States? East Palestine disaster was awful, but what other communities are at risk from the regular rail shipment of vinyl chloride in communities here in the United States? And one of the things that really made us curious about that was that there was a similar derailment that took place 12 years prior in Paulsboro, New Jersey. Like in East Palestine, we saw a massive breach of vinyl chloride. In fact, the levels of vinyl chloride that were released in that incident were so high, based on air monitoring and air modeling, people in the community could have died in that incident. The levels were extremely high. Like in East Palestine, a ACE survey revealed that many community residents, as well as first responders, developed health problems that were consistent with exposure to vinyl chloride. This one company whose trains derailed was also oxyvinyls. And the thing that really got us interested to put out this report was that in both cases, in East Palestine and also in Paulsboro, New Jersey, 12 years prior, the vinyl chloride was being shipped from a chemical plant right outside of Houston, and it was on its way to a PVC production plant in Pedricktown, New Jersey. So both in East Palestine and in Paulsboro 12 years prior, the vinyl chloride was being shipped from the same plant, and it was going to the very same plant that you see pictured here. And that really made us want to understand, well, how much vinyl chloride is shipped around the U.S. on an average, on an annual basis, and what communities may be at risk as a result. We were shocked. I've been working on toxics issues for more than 20 years. I worked with Steve at CHJ for 9 years. We found that at any given moment, oxyvinyl ships more than 200 train cars across the country. So right now, chances are there are about 200 rail cars that are traveling from their plants in Texas, and they're on their way to New Jersey. They're traveling through hundreds of cities and towns, and in total, they have about 36 million pounds of vinyl chloride on the rails right now. Annually, when we crunch the numbers on an annual basis, the plastics industry ships approximately 1.5 billion pounds of vinyl chloride by rail to these factories. These factories are located in New Jersey, such as the one that I showed. There are actually 2 vinyl production plants in New Jersey. They're also shipped to factories in Illinois, as well as Niagara Falls, Canada. And this is just Oxy. We did not, in this report, look at other producers like Westlake Chemical, and stay tuned on that. But again, any given moment, 36 million pounds of vinyl chloride on the rail. Well, where does this travel? So looking at government reports, looking at railroad maps, looking at folks that are really like nerdy about the railroad industry who take photos of rail cars, we were able to piece together and figure out what is the most likely route of where vinyl chloride is regularly shipped when it travels from their plant in New Jersey, from their plant in Texas to New Jersey. As you'll see here, this is a massive route. It's nearly 2,000 miles long. And that's a huge concern, especially because the vinyl chloride not only travels through smaller towns like East Palestine, but through some major metropolitan areas with literally millions of people in some of these cities. Places like Houston, Texas, Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Philadelphia, Little Rock, Toledo, Fort Wayne, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. I know we're very close to Pittsburgh. So at any given moment, one of the things I didn't mention is that if we look at this, how many people live in close proximity to this rail route? So as I think many of you know by now, the federal government recommends that if there's an accident involving vinyl chloride, the federal government recommends at a minimum an initial 1 mile evacuation. So for people that live within a 1 mile radius, they should be evacuated if there's a vinyl chloride derailment involving fire like we saw in East Palestine last year. We looked at, well, how many people live within a mile of this train route? Across the country, we found that there are more than 3 million people that live within a mile radius of where vinyl chloride is regularly shipped across the year. Literally thousands of rail cars are traveling across the country over the year, putting an estimated 3 million people at risk. We also found at the same time, there's over 1,500 schools also within this 1 mile radius. Take a look at this. Here's a little bit of information that might be of interest to some of y'all locally. So as I mentioned, Pittsburgh is one of the places where vinyl chloride regularly is shipped through. We found that, we looked at the route, and we found that there are 22,000 people that live within a 1 mile radius of where vinyl chloride is shipped through Pittsburgh. And in fact, there's also 11 schools that are located within a 1 mile radius. Toledo, Ohio, there's over 11,000 people within a 1 mile radius. So if there was another disaster, particularly in one of these large metropolitan cities, think about how crazy the response would be. Here is Philadelphia, one of the places where vinyl chloride is regularly shipped through. There are 60,000 people that live within a 1 mile radius in this instance. 95% of those folks are people of color. In addition, there's about 18 public and private schools that are also in close proximity. So this is a huge issue. East Palestine was an awful disaster, one of the worst disasters in U.S. history, but it's going to happen again. It happened 12 years ago in Paulsboro, New Jersey. It happened last year. Every year, 1.5 billion pounds of vinyl chloride are on the rails. It's only a matter of time before this happens again. And that's why we need the US EPA to take action now. The good news is, as some of you know, last month the EPA announced for the first time in a generation that they're evaluating whether or not to regulate or restrict vinyl chloride under the Federal Toxic Substances Control Act. We've known about the dangers of vinyl chloride since the 1970s, and that's because workers in factories were getting sick. They were developing a rare form of liver cancer called our angiosarcoma of the liver. The workers, their fingers, the bones in their fingers were also crumbling. We've known for decades that this is a highly toxic chemical, it's dangerous to transport, and it's especially harmful on the communities and the workers where it's made, and it's a consumer safety issue as well, which is a whole other presentation. And finally, there's no safe way to dispose of it. The final slide that I wanted to note is, well, where do the rail cars go to? So as I mentioned, in East Palestine, the rail cars were on their way to this factory in New Jersey that you see here. You actually see the rail cars there. This is a factory located in Pedricktown, New Jersey. The number one use of vinyl chloride is in PVC. The number one use of PVC is in building materials, like vinyl siding, like vinyl flooring, pipes. This factory has had a financial relationship with Armstrong Flooring going back to the 1970s. So if you think about it, companies like the Home Depot and Lowe's and other major retailers that sell products that are made with vinyl chloride and thereby PVC plastic literally are profiting from the sale of products that are putting communities like East Palestine at risk. And this goes on day in and day out. Again, at any given moment, 36 million pounds of vinyl chloride on the rails. So we have an opportunity. We're now calling on the EPA to ban vinyl chloride. It's really exciting that the EPA is looking at this. Unfortunately, it's going to take a number of years before the EPA makes a decision. It's probably going to be 6 to 8 years. So that's why we're calling on big retailers like the Home Depot to take action. And guess what? We've done it before. In recent years, we've gotten the EPA to ban methylene chloride in paint removal products. We got them to ban TCE in certain applications. I say a proposed banning, I should say. They've also proposed banning PERC. What do those three chemicals have in common? They're all carcinogens like vinyl chloride, and they're all chlorinated chemicals like vinyl chloride. and they put communities like East Palestine at an unreasonable risk. So in the months to come, you'll be hearing from the Unity Council and us on ways you can get involved in these campaigns to push for systemic reform. The disaster in East Palestine was awful, but if there's any one good thing that comes out of it, it would be so that no other community has to experience what y'all have experienced. We have an opportunity to make tremendous change here. We have an opportunity to get the EPA to ban this chemical once and for all. And at the same time, we have an opportunity to change the practices of some of the biggest corporations in the world that are profiting off of it. And if you don't think it's doable, take out your iPhone. Who here has an iPhone? 10 years ago, Apple announced that they would stop using PVC plastic in their iPhones. Have any of y'all ever shopped at IKEA, maybe, online? I don't know if there's any IKEAs, yeah, maybe not as much. 30 years ago, IKEA stopped using PVC plastic in their stores. And that's not all. Other big companies like Nike have done so as well. So if major brands like Nike and Apple and IKEA can do this, we think that retailers like the Home Depot and Lowe's can and should as well. That ends my presentation. If you're interested in looking at the reports we just mentioned, they're available for free on our website, toxicfreefuture.org. Thanks a lot.
Again, standing in for Unity Council, a real pleasure and honor to introduce the real rock star of science and dioxin, Stephen Lester, who has really helped us. My testing would be worthless without Dr. Stephen Lester because of his expertise and his support of the community, and he's not afraid to speak out.
Thank you, Scott. Well, I do not have any slides. I'm just going to talk a little bit. I'm going to share some of my experiences being here and some of what I've learned over the years about chemicals and how that's playing out here in East Palestine. Before I get into that, I want to say thank you to the people who organized this event here today and for inviting me to be a part of it. It's really an honor for me to be here and to be able to speak to you and share with you some of our experiences and mine personally. Let me say a little bit about where I work. I work for an organization called the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. We were founded in 1981 by a woman named Lois Gibbs, who was the community leader at Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. What we do as an organization is we work with communities, very much like East Palestine here, that have had chemical contamination problems, and they're trying to figure out how to address them, how to deal with it. And we've been doing this for over 40 years. My role in the organization as the scientist is to help people, is to do two things. One is to help people understand the science, and that means reading reports, engineering and health studies and environmental test results, telling them what it means and what it doesn't say, and helping them address the questions they need to ask to figure it out. But that's one half, an important half. But the other half of my work is to help people figure out how to use that science in their organizing work, in their campaign work, to help them understand what the science can say and what, just as importantly, what it does not say. And I want to speak to that some more, because that's what's happening here in East Palestine. So I got involved in all this when I was hired by the state of New York to be a science advisor to the residents at Love Canal. That's where I met Lois. That's where I got involved in toxics work. And so I spent 2 years at Love Canal. And when I came here almost a year ago, it was last February, and attended the town hall meeting, and what really struck me was, here I am in a community. There were over 200 people in that room last year, and there was raw emotion. There was just tension everywhere, and it took me immediately. I had flashbacks to the meetings at Love Canal, because it was deja vu all over again. I mean, here I am sitting in a community asking almost the same questions. You know, like, what can I do with my kids? Can I go in my yard? Can I cut my grass? You know, what's going to happen to me? And those are the questions people were asking at Love Canal. And I realized that at the time, the first thing that, when I learned about all what was happened here, the first thing that occurred to me is, my God, this is, these people have been exposed to dioxin. They're burning vinyl chloride. God knows why they made that decision at the time. But they did. The government did, or it actually looks like it's Norfolk Southern who did. But nonetheless, we ended up, and I thought of that because of all of our experience with dioxin. We've done so much work over the years on dioxin. We had a campaign to stop dioxin exposure that lasted almost 20 years. A campaign. We've written books on dioxin. We've sponsored conferences, community conferences that brought in communities that have been exposed to dioxin together to share information and learn from each other. And dioxin, you probably learned more about dioxin than you ever thought you ever wanted to in the last year or so. But dioxin is not a single chemical. I think you've recognized this at this point. There are 75 dioxin-like compounds, several of which are very toxic. One of them, called 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorodibenzoparadioxin, or TCDD for short, is one of the most toxic chemicals ever tested in this country. It's a highly potent carcinogen. But it doesn't just cause cancer. It causes reproductive problems, neurodevelopmental problems, immune system problems, infertility, affects the hormone systems, causes diabetes, causes heart problems. I mean, there's a very long list of all the things that it causes and leads to. And it does these at extraordinarily low levels. Extraordinarily low levels. You hear people talk about, a drop of vermouth in a swimming pool. Well, that kind of drop, if it's dioxin, can lead to adverse health problems. So dioxin is a very nasty chemical. Skin rashes is another thing it causes. One of the classic examples of being exposed to dioxin is a skin disease called chloracne. So it's a nasty chemical, dioxin. And so when I first came and I realized they had done this burn of vinyl chloride, well, my first question was, why have they tested for dioxins? And they didn't. EPA had, and at the time, EPA had actually no interest in testing for dioxins. I mean, what Scott showed us earlier today is that they knew before, actually I was there the 23rd is when I was here, and they knew already at that time that they had found dioxin. And then, and where they found it is where they burned it. And that's the place where they've never released that data. I don't know if it's in that 1,500 pages. But the testing at the site where the burn occurred, I have not seen any data on whether it's dioxin or any of these other chemicals. So it'd be great to be able to see some of that. I mean, that'll be really helpful. But, so, without testing for dioxin, and this is one of the things I said a year ago, is that without that information, we won't know what the risks are to people in this community. People will be asking these questions, and some of you are still asking these questions, because despite the fact that EPA has spent, I don't know how many millions on doing testing, but the testing they've done, and Scott has already pointed to it earlier, the testing that they have done. And we did an analysis of the EPA data that they released in March and April. The first round of testing, some 130 samples or so. We looked at that very carefully. And what we realized is that the way they made decisions about where to test and how they collected their samples enormously influenced the results. One of the things I've learned over all these years looking at all this data is that data is only as good as how the samples are collected. If it's garbage in, you get garbage out. And what EPA did, the first thing they did is they said to the contractor, you can do whatever you want. And the contractor said, well, we're going to decide where to take our samples by walking the site and looking for evidence of contamination. If we see it, we'll take a sample there. Well, in all my years of doing this work, I've never seen EPA give anybody carte blanche like that. It's so subjective. And this is the company that's responsible for this. They're going to go out and decide where to take the test, and that's going to be a legitimate and honest test. Maybe, but more likely not. So that was a huge error, just giving them that. Always, in every other situation I've reviewed, EPA always says, well, you have to have an objective grid pattern of some kind to select where to sample. They never test contaminated sites by walking the site. They would be laughed out of the room if some company went to EPA, other than Norfolk Southern, and said, this is what we're going to do. So EPA did 180 for them, for this site, for whatever reason. And then they went and took these samples at 2 levels, at the surface, the 0 to 6, and then below. Why would they go 15 inches below the surface? There's nothing, again, Scott pointed this out in his slides. Dioxin is very insoluble in water. It's not going to trickle down. It's going to be at the surface. So those are a complete waste of samples, everything below the surface. And then the surface samples they took were composite samples, again, as Scott pointed out. So that means they mix that tube, and so if there's anything at the surface, it's diluted. So again, you're getting all these results that indicate, well, there's no problem here, but the truth of the matter is that you don't know if there's no problem because the testing they did was so lousy, so unprofessional, so subjective, that it can't be trusted. So that's a big piece of why EPA walks around saying that they didn't find anything. But if you still take all of their results and look at it, there's still a lot of results there that indicate there's a risk. Of the 132 samples, 42 of them exceeded that EPA risk screening level for dioxin at 4.8. 42, which is like 30%. And then there was another group of another chemical that also exceeded these values, but we don't know. All the results that EPA put on its website is homogenized. They didn't give any identifiers so that you can know whether these 3 samples are all from the same location. So you can't say, well, these are the results, these 3 results were from one location. Or you can't say that these, like of those areas, of those 42 samples, if that's your home or my home or somebody else's home, you want to know that. But we don't know that. So as an independent scientist, I could not look at any of that thousands of pages of data, and we looked through a lot of that. Not 1,500, actually. It wasn't 1,000, it was hundreds. But not 1,500 pages. But I couldn't judge the quality of the data because beyond looking at how they collected it and realizing even if I could, I wouldn't trust it. So EPA's data is not worth the paper it's written on. Now, a couple more things. All right. One of the things I want to say also is that it's not just dioxin that's a problem here. There are a lot of other chemicals that were on that train that were burned, that got into the creeks. And it's not just dioxin. While dioxin is a highly toxic chemical that we really want to pay attention to and we care about, there's also other chemicals. And one of the lessons I'm taking away from being here and looking at this and evaluating this as a toxicologist is that people here have been exposed to a broad mixture of contaminants, of chemicals, at maybe low concentrations. The numbers we don't know. We don't know what people were exposed to because EPA didn't do any testing. We don't know what the concentrations were, and we don't know how many chemicals. And we don't know what the combined effects of all these exposures are, or how long these exposures have been occurring. I mean, yes, it's not just the original spill, it's not just the burning, it's the cleanup. The constant digging up of that soil and moving it and disturbing it. When I was here that first couple of weeks, I couldn't believe what was going on here. Guys, aerators in the middle of the town, in the neighborhood, taking chemicals and pumping them out of the creeks and putting them into the air, and people are breathing this as they're walking around town. The workers who are working on it are not wearing any protective gear. I mean, again, this is unheard of. This doesn't happen. But yet it was happening here because EPA turned their back and let the company do whatever it wanted. But going back, so with all of these uncertainties, with all of these chemicals that people have been exposed to, and the lack of good data that tells people what they've been exposed to, what do you do? What do you do? And that's the question you're all asking now. What's happening? What's happening to my kids? What's my future? What's going to happen to me? And I think that there's not much that we as scientists can say, in all honesty. I mean, that's what I would want EPA to tell you, is that as scientists, we don't understand what's happening to people exposed to the kind of mixtures you've been exposed to. What does EPA do instead? It uses antiquated risk valuations that are based on exposure to a single chemical, that don't take into account interactions, that don't take into account cumulative effects or combined effects. So they're making a judgment on using an approach that's completely out of touch and irrelevant for what's happened here. And it's really not just disingenuous, but borders on fraud for them to say to you that it's okay, that our analysis is sufficient. You guys you shouldn't be seeing any health problems in this community. Scientifically, there's no basis for that. That's not just an opinion. It's a narrative that they've been trying to sell to you from day one. And there's no science behind that. There's nothing they can do except this antiquated approach that is totally irrelevant for what's happened here. You have not exposed to a single chemical. It's a mixture. You've been exposed for, in some cases, almost a year during the entire cleanup. Not just the burn, not just the spill. So it's a combination of things. But I want a couple more minutes, and then I'll wrap up. But this has happened before to other communities and other situations where people were exposed to multiple low-level chemicals. It happened at 9/11 to the first responders and volunteers who went into those burning buildings. They breathed smoke, they breathed the fumes, the particulates, everything that was going on there. It also happened to the burn pit soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, overseas. And there are other situations where these kind of exposures existed. And the government said in those situations, well, here's what we can do. We know that it's impossible to assess the health risks and determine whether people's health problems were caused by that exposure. So we're going to presume that they were exposed, and we're going to take care of these people. So they're giving them health care, they're setting up medical monitoring, and they're giving them other compensation. They did this for Agent Orange veterans. They did it for Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. You're probably seeing the ads all the time. I don't know. So they're a precedent for the government to step in and say, in these kind of broad exposures where people have been exposed to multiple chemicals and we don't have any scientific understanding of what it means, they've already done it. Why shouldn't they do that here in East Palestine? And they should. So I'm going to stop with that. I'm happy to answer questions if there were any time. I don't know that there is. It's always also late. But I thank you again for inviting me here. I'm happy. I'm not here like Scott day in and day out as often as he is, but CHEJ and myself, we are also committed to staying with the fight as long as it takes. Thank you all.
So now I'd like to introduce Genevieve, who will be presenting for or with, I think Dr. Gollum is on the phone. She couldn't be here in person.
Hi, everybody.
everybody. I'm Marcy Evans. I was out there in the mobile phlebotomy lab area. Thank you all to the residents who, chose to participate today. And if any of you are interested in our study after hearing our talk and want to participate in our mobile phlebotomy, please reach out to us. We're here for you guys. We're independently funded. UC San Diego. So thank you. Here's John.
Thank you so much. And I think we had some slides. That's cool. Great. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Genevieve Kulkarni, and I am one of the study coordinators at the Galamb Research Group at UC San Diego under Dr. Beatrice Galamb, MD, PhD. Okay, so a little bit of tech, there we go. So a little bit about why we got involved. We do have a long interest and background in chemical, drug, and environmental problems. Some of our work has led to identification and the recognition of several adverse health effects, as well as regulatory changes about mixed toxin conditions. And as we watched the events of East Palestine unfold, we were concerned about the early messaging, which seemed very dismissive towards health problems and health risks, and the overall lack of response. Through our previous work with the health effects of chemical exposures, we have definitely seen these initial dismissive attitudes towards problems before. We have strong expertise in mixed toxin exposure, and some of Dr. Galamb's expertise relevant to East Palestine issues include a background in medicine. She has an MD and decades of clinical experience. She has a PhD in biology, as well as postdoctoral training in epidemiology. She also has a track record of running several very successful large studies. And she has been working for a long time with veterans who suffer from Gulf War illness. And Gulf War illness is a chronic multi-symptom condition which is clearly tied to environmental toxin exposures, including burn pits, very analogous to issues we see here in East Palestine. And from what we learned with Gulf War illness, we knew that it is important to get as much information regarding health as soon as possible after an exposure event. And that's kind of most of the reason that we are here today, to try to get as much information as possible. Our work has helped show that core mechanisms of toxicity are shared across chemicals. So even though the chemicals were different in these two different events, the mechanisms they have are shared across most chemicals. And some of these mechanisms include oxidative stress, which is a type of injury that antioxidants help protect against, as well as mitochondrial impairment, with mitochondria being the energy powerhouse of your cells. And mitochondrial impairment is something that is implicated in almost all the chemicals that were released during the derailment. For Gulf War illness, our work has been instrumental in advancing the understanding of implicated exposures, risk factors like genetics and past exposures, illness features, objective markers, mechanisms of illness, as well as treatments for reducing symptoms and improving function and improving quality of life. We really hope to take the decades of lessons learned there to help prevent decades of suffering here. In the face of multiple people reporting health problems, in the face of a multi-toxin release event and burn event, where several animals have also died, safety cannot be asserted with any level of confidence. So these safety claims are not justified. Even if there were good quality human safety data for each individual chemical, and there is not, and even if the levels were known individually to be safe at all times and in all places, which it is not, and even if the safety could be asserted for each individual regardless of vulnerability, the combination of these chemicals can still be toxic. There are currently no requirements for safety data on chemical combinations. And when you take up to 10 different chemicals, there are over 1,000 possible combinations, and each of these combinations can have different behaviors and can act differently. These chemicals can injure cells both additively and synergistically, and the biological injuries we see caused by these chemicals need not go away just because the chemical does. An analogy we like to use is removing the hammer does not undo the head injury that it causes. So what we hope to learn through our study, we would like to learn what the health problems are both early and later on, in adults and in children and in the next generation. We want to learn who is at risk and for what. Through our previous work with exposures, we know that not all people are affected equally. Your symptoms and health effects can differ by your health, your medications, habits, age, sex, genetics, and past exposures. We want to learn what can be done to decrease these risks, perhaps through diet, exercise, supplements, or habits, and what the impacts are to your health and other impacts for those who have been affected. What is in our health study? You are eligible to participate if you are within an area that was affected by the plume, and we welcome participants whether you do or do not currently have health problems. You are equally important to us whether you are currently suffering from any health issues or even if you're not. We want everyone. So all the participants would complete a survey portion, which is a longitudinal survey, which just means we do it over time, which looks at your short, medium, and long-term health effects. The survey will inquire about your exposures, health, covariates like protective and risk factors, and impacts, for example, financial or housing. Optional health study elements include laboratory tests, which are done at a Quest facility closest to you, where we test not just for toxins, but for health effects. These include liver, kidney, and reproductive function tests. We have a wristband for non-targeted toxin testing, which is a wristband you'd wear around your wrist in your daily life for a week and then mail back to us. We do a cheek swab for genetic testing, vitals like blood pressure, heart rate, and weight, which are things that are commonly affected during exposures. We have lung function testing through peak flow meters and oxygen saturation. Mechanism testing through mitochondrial blood spot cards, which is just another type of blood test. And these mechanism tests kind of show us the biological changes that toxins could cause that could be making you ill. We also do archive samples of blood and urine, what we were doing today, actually. And so in the future, if we ever think of something that we should have been testing for at this time, and we're like, oh, I wish I could have tested at this time, we can go back and take these samples and actually get them tested. There was a National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine meeting a short while ago regarding East Palestine and the issues, and they recommended a bunch of different things that they recommend studies have within their framework, most of which our study was already doing before the meeting. These include toxin testing and archive samples of blood and urine, liver function and reproductive hormone tests. We include children in our study. We have non-targeted toxin testing through the wristbands, and this means that we don't just test a specific type of chemicals. These are open-ended tests. And we look at diet and genetic risks as well through our surveys. How can the study help? The results of the lab tests that you do through this study will be shared with you for those who wish it. And you can also share these results with your doctor, which can help lead to enhanced surveillance and early detection of some problems. And even if problems are not detected through these lab tests, as time goes on and we see some problems arising within the group, this can help you with some early surveillance and could potentially lead to curative treatment, which would not be possible with delayed detection. It may uncover protective measures, perhaps through diet, habits, or supplements. And as soon as we find any findings from our study, they will be shared with participants as soon as we can. By participating, help yourself, help your family, help your neighbors, and help others. Just as we have taken the lessons learned from Gulf War illness to prove useful or helpful to the residents of East Palestine, we hope that lessons learned here can prove useful for people who are affected in future mixed toxin events. Thank you to everyone who came today, and thank you for the amazing turnout we had for our blood draw event, the entire East Palestine community, as well as the event organizers. To participate, or if you guys want some more information, I have our contact details below. And to the right is a QR code for donations or to our websites. We currently are mostly self-funded at the moment, and so if you know anyone who's willing to donate, any amount is useful. We absolutely do not expect those who've been affected to donate, but feel free to use the QR code to go to our website. And thank you all again so much for your time.
Now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Rick Chai. I believe you're the founder of Off the Rails, right?
Yes.
And whoever thought he'd be running for Congress to put the whole country back on the rails?
You know I wasn't going to stand down there, right? Thank you, Scott. This is really grassroots. I'm my own videographer. Let me pick this up. I won't keep you long. I actually have also an interview to do in a little bit. I was apologizing initially for the way I'm dressed. I was going to come here a little dressier, but Randy and Laura took me for an interview first thing this morning, I haven't stopped since. I decided then to go knock on doors because I'm going to win this. Hey, Tam, can I have this? Is that? No, I can grab it. Oh, all right. I'll make this a little more intimate here. Okay, so I'm going to switch this up a little bit because I'm not really going to talk much about my campaign. If you are interested in me, go to my webpage. Last name is TSAI, rickchai.com. And I'll talk a bit about what I plan to do, but more so, since this is about what happened to East Palestine, I want to talk about that. So I'll tell you who I am. When my father came here from mainland China, and this was when it was not communist, and he came over on a college visa. Before he came, he told me that his expression was he saw communism coming over the hill, meaning friends, and it was being infiltrated in the area. It was kind of like America then. My grandfather, his father, was a senator, and when my father came over on his college visa, his family was imprisoned for having been in the prior government. My father would never see his father again, as he would just vanish. So my father, when he took his citizenship, he told me that was the proudest moment of his life. So he always instilled into me how important American freedom is. He loved the Chinese people. My wife and I had the pleasure of going to China a while back, and they're beautiful, beautiful people. He despised the Chinese government. All around the world, we all have basic wants and needs. We want our families to be safe. We want to be safe. So we're all pretty much the same. It's the governments that are different. So when you get down to it, no matter race or creed or who you are, who you identify as, we all just, we want to live our lives and be happy. So I'll talk about Palestine. And like I said, I'm not going to keep you here long. For the last year, I've been documenting the creeks and the waterways in East Palestine. I was known as the Creek Ranger. And that happened because if you look at the early videos of my wife and I, interviewed, somebody in town told people that, hey, maybe go talk to Dr. Chai. I don't know how the media heard about us. We didn't seek them out. And they started interviewing us. Hey, also want to thank everybody. I see that Rich is gone. Rich McHugh from News Nation. He's been just here on the ground forever. There he is. Just dogged determination to cover this story, which I believe is one of the biggest cover-ups that I know of. As I was sitting there, I got a message, an email from CBS News. They followed me around one day, and I showed them the chemicals in the creek, and this is as late as just about a month ago. And she said, sorry, Dr. Chai, your chemicals didn't make the cut. I'm not sure why that would be. That is CBS National News. And she said, I'm so sorry. And I said, hey, that's the way it goes. We're used to it. I'm not angry. It's just we've come to expect it. But I'm showing the chemicals in the creek for the last year, and we had Dr. Lester up here. Initially, when the media contacted us, I was actually very positive because I've never had any experience with the FDA prior to this, and my wife was kind of the scared, really upset one. And on TV, you can see me saying, hey, Tammy, that's okay. Hey, EPA says it's going to be fine. That remains to be seen about our water. So about through 2.5 weeks into this, I wanted to see for myself. So I went down to the creek, and I came back, and all I said to my wife was, we are effed, and I didn't abbreviate it. Everywhere I walked, everywhere I stepped, every rock I turned over, chemicals just boiled out. And they were telling us that they contained, a lot of it well, how would they contain it if it was seen, since Cincinnati shut its water intakes off from the Ohio River, the plume was seen as far as Wheeling, West Virginia, the Ohio River. So at that point, I knew we were in a little bit of trouble. So Dr. Lester was up here. He was talking about dioxins and not knowing the whole mix of chemicals that happen. Here's all I can tell you. I would never, being a doctor, I've learned that never discount what patients tell you. Okay, there are a lot of doctors that I have seen what I would call, what other doctors would call rejects that came to my office, and I'm saying, wow, this person really does have problems, real problems. And so when neighbors are pitted against neighbors and brothers are pitted against brothers and husbands and wives are splitting up because of the derailment here, because one doesn't believe the other that the other is sick or something happened to them, I will tell you this. I might be a little more inclined not to believe everybody if it didn't happen to me myself. So that first day that I went to the creek, I lost about 80%. My wife, I used to drive her crazy. My wife Tammy's sitting right here, my best friend. You won't see me get emotional except when I talk about my wife, so that's it. And I'm running for Congress, so I got a tough side too, so I got to hide that side. But when I went to the creek, I lost about 80% of my. So what I'm saying was, I'd go around the house, I smell mold in here, and then I don't smell anything. And then we had the roof investigated, and there was mold in one part of our house. The wood was getting wet, so I always had a very acute sense of smell. Until another man-made disaster took it away. That was COVID. So I was, you can hear me in those initial videos. That first day, my nose is down near the creek, and I say in the video, I wonder if I can smell these chemicals, and you hear me sniffing. So I may have had maybe 6 headaches in my entire life. I do not get headaches, and when I got the headaches, those were associated with the flu or some kind of illness. Before I got back to my car, I called my friend and said, my head is pounding. And he said, get out of there. So I went back home, and that night, 3 a.m, I was having some incredible nightmares. And this has probably happened to every one of you. I woke up, and the reason I was having a nightmare is because my body hurt so bad. My joints hurt, and my stomach was grumbling. I had to get up and run to the bathroom, and I had explosive diarrhea, which did not go away for 4 weeks. I had to leave patient rooms to, say excuse me, and I had to go use the bathroom. When I did wake up at 3 a.m, I had a burn that was a straight line down my nasal cavity, into my mouth, into the back of my throat, and into my chest. From that point on, I also had a rash, and headaches, constant headaches. So then, I got my military gear. I stayed out of the creeks, but there's something about it that when you would see the EPA say everything is fine, it just compelled me to go back in. So I then put my military gear and would go on, but you go in the creeks. But the water, you couldn't go in the creeks without the water splashing you somewhere. And every time it would splash, I would get rashes where that water splashed on me. And then sometimes I would get it on my chest and different parts of my body that I knew didn't get wet. So the one night I'm getting a shower late. Tammy had already gone to bed. I'm in the shower and I'm washing my back and I'm like, what is that? So it ended up being a teacup-sized lump on my back. If you've ever been to the seashore and saw a jellyfish and touched a jellyfish, that was the consistency of what that lump was. It had tentacles coming out of it. And I'm a doctor. I'm thinking, first thing in my mind was like, lymphoma. But no, there's no way. It doesn't come overnight. Something in my mind then goes to a histamine reaction. This guy must have some kind of histamine reaction to what I have on my back. And I still believe that's what it was, to some kind of chemical. It took 4 days for that lump to go down. We have pictures of it. I'm 60 years old. I've never had anything like that in my entire life. Never had any health problems, don't take any medication. I will tell you, when the aerators in the park, which was another failed EPA disaster, When I would film, there were 3 aerators in the entrance to the East Palestine Park, and it suddenly turned to 24 the day before they said they were going to dig up the tracks. And it doesn't take a genius to say, well, they have these aerators here because they're going to send chemicals down into the, when they dig up the tracks, more chemicals are going to come down the creek. And so when I was shocked to see those aerators, there are 24 of them in total, so I got out of my car and I started filming them without PPE, and I'm so close the water's hitting me. For 4 weeks, I've never had acid reflux in my life or heartburn. For 4 weeks after that, at least, I had acid reflux so bad, it's almost if you spray a mist bottle, it was squirting from my esophagus into my mouth. So it was burning my mouth, it was burning my tongue, and I don't take medication. I could barely work. In some of those interviews right around that period of time, you heard me coughing and clearing my throat while I'm talking on television. And I had my staff run out one day because it's hard to talk to patients. They had to give me an over-the-counter acid reflux medication. So these things are real, what happened to people. When you look at the acrolein, the butyl acrylate, the benzene, I did my own independent test. All chain of custody was myself. It became to be like Big Brother because, that the concept of that show is you wonder who to trust. So I said, just this once I'm going to order a test from Eurofins Labs, and I'm going to take that test, and we're going to see what happens. So it came back high levels of isopropyl benzene. You don't want to touch that. You don't want to inhale that. You don't want your kids to play in those creeks, and you certainly don't want to drink it. Isopropyl benzene or cumene breaks down to amethylstyrene in your body, which is a genotoxic carcinogen, and it was in high levels of in those creeks. These BPA bottles, that no longer have BPA, but I submit to you, drinking out of plastic is certainly not healthy at all. But the reason we don't have BPA in bottles anymore is because the BPA would interfere with your hormonal system and change that as you grew older, leaving you more susceptible to certain cancers. That is a secondary pathway that BPA uses. It interferes with your hormonal system, which leads to something else. A genotoxic carcinogen, there is no intermediate pathway. It enters your cells, and it denatures your DNA right on the spot from the get-go. So that is not a healthy thing to be in our creeks. So I was, let me now, how long have I been talking? I don't know, maybe keep you another 5-10 minutes. I'll tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing. I was begged by a lot of members of the community to go in front of our city council and give those results. I had lost trust in everybody at that point because there were so many lies, deceptions done by what I believe is our corrupt local, state, and federal government that I was hesitant to do it because I knew the reaction I would get, and the reaction I got was exactly the one I expected. So a lot of people went before me to address city council on this meeting, on this night, and the city council was very, they consoled people, meaning if you went up there and you said, boy, I'm getting sick, I smell smells in my house, I don't think it's safe. And they got to the point where the city council was getting up and coming and hugging people. And I have a theory about that. To me, it was disingenuous because if you cannot prove something, you're not afraid to show sympathy for somebody if that person can't prove it. So you have the appearance that you care about that person, but you really know they can't prove what they're saying. So you can show caring for that person with no ramifications to you. Because when it comes down to it, these are what these companies want. They know that it's going to be very hard to prove things later on in life when people, let me back up. God forbid anybody gets sick, but if they do, it's going to be very hard to prove. So when I went up and I talked about my tests and what I did, and I sent it to Eurofins, it never left my hands. I drove it up to their branch in Cleveland, and those results came back. They said meeting adjourned. So I didn't get a question from them. And that's about what I expected. in my race, in my congressional race, I was in, the mayor endorsed, our town mayor endorsed my opponent, and he sent me a message. I called him back. The message was sent and unsent, but I have a pretty good memory, and I just happened to be looking at Facebook at the time, and I saw the number. So I called him back. I remembered the number, and I asked him what he wanted. So we started talking, and he said to me, he said, you know, Rick, he said, I really wanted to endorse you. You're the guy I wanted to endorse for the congressional run. I mean, how awesome would it be to have a congressman right in East Palestine, Ohio? And he said, but for the things you said about me during this entire time, as a man, I just couldn't do that. And that is when I lost even more respect for him. And I don't know the mayor. I just know his mishandling of this entire thing. And so I'm giving you a little example of what goes on in even local government is what we all need to worry about and why you need to pay more attention about who you're putting in office. I have an ego. Anybody that, wants to do things, we all have egos, okay? But I believe a real man puts his ego aside when it's for the betterment of the community or whatever it may be, and he may reach out a hand and help people. That's not what I saw in our mayor. I don't believe he ever spoke up for any resident, any displaced resident, anyone that got sick. And he said to me, it came out sometime, I don't really have any power. It's really city council. And that is so wrong. I have no power. I'm not an elected official. It's the power of the voice. And so that's what you all have done as well. And that's why this would have been gone long ago. Those of you from Palestine here, when the press came in the first time, what happened when they left? Nothing. The big wheels kept turning. Nothing happened, right? The Norfolk Southern was the entity in charge of of the cleanup, and nothing really happened. I'm asking you. The press is going to be in town for this anniversary, and you've all been probably, a lot of you from Palestine are sitting here as I'm looking around. I know you've been interviewed several times by media. Realize that when they leave, it's going to be the same old situation here. So I ask you to let people know that I am running. I've done pretty well in life. I don't need friends, and I don't need money. As I said, my wife is my friend. I've got a couple good friends that have been with me a lifetime. I want to go to Washington, and I want to make some changes. I'm a non-politician. I didn't think about doing this 8 weeks ago. I'm just a pissed off resident where major corruption has happened in his town. So I walked into my room. I came home on a Wednesday night, busy Wednesday night, treating patients, in almost a catatonic zombie-like state. Because what happens, people from East Palestine have felt this. You try and try and try, and you expose the lies. Chemicals are gone. I show the chemicals. I rolled off the road. That's maybe from some gasoline from cars. I was the only one that I know of that consistently tested people here, and for blood work and urine samples. High levels of benzene in their blood. Oh, maybe they pumped gas that day. High levels of vinyl chloride metabolites in their body, which, by the way, they say is not very accurate. That's the same test they used for the children in Asia that lived by the petrol plants, that the children in elementary school had to be moved because their blood work was high in that same thiodiaglycolic acid. If it was good enough to move kids away from an elementary school, why is it not good enough for East Palestine? So, hey, maybe they cut a 10-pound bag of onions for a picnic that day, and that's why they have such high levels of the metabolite in their body. So you tend to give up. It's a carrot and a stick, right? A donkey, you dangle a carrot in front of its face, and it needs a bite of the carrot once in a while. It stops walking forward. So I come home on a Wednesday night in the zombie-like state that we're all in, kind of depressed. And I was getting tired. and you didn't feel like getting up in the morning. And it was hard to go to work after a year of this. I will tell you, since I've started this, I'm sleeping 3 to 5 hours a night. The reason I look like I do today, I was going to wear a suit here, but Randy got me up in the morning, and thank God he got me on a really nice interview. I've got an interview later on tonight on News Nation. I got another News Nation interview. But the reason I look like this is then I just went campaigning all day. But now I lost myself. Where was I? Yes, I got home from work. Come home from work in a catatonic state, tired, listless, and that's how we all feel. My wife's cooking dinner, and she turns to me. She doesn't even say hello. She says, "Rick, you need to run for Bill Johnson's seat." And she had just interviewed some people that were hurt by this accident. And a lot of these people are the ones that people wouldn't know in the media, because they're the vocal ones, but there is a majority of people that are afraid to speak up. They've been hurt, but they're afraid of ramifications from their neighbors. And I've never seen such callous things happen in a community as I've seen in East Palestine. It just shocked me. I thought I knew the community, where people have been treated so badly by neighbors, by Norfolk Southern, by whatever entity it may be. To that level that it just shocked me. So anyway, I was like a deer in the headlights. I thought for a few minutes, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So it didn't take me long to get all the signatures I needed, and I filed. I was the first person to file. So if you want something to happen, those of you from East Palestine, make sure you do the work and get the word out and tell people about me. I was in my 30s. I built one of the largest chiropractic offices in the nation. Doctors used to fly in to see what I was doing from all parts of the country. I know how to run a business. I know how to get things done. I know how to talk with people. I believe the two politicians against me, they're kind of embedded like Alabama ticks, but I'm going to pry them out and I'm going to win this thing. They say I can't win it. I don't have the backing of, I'm a Republican. But listen, I have Democrats that want to switch sides. They say they're going to, I'm honored by that. And it's been a long day. I've ate breakfast, I had a smoothie, and I haven't eaten anything since. So it's been a long day. But they want to switch sides to vote for me. I want to talk about that real quick here. When somebody said, hey, come look at my house, I think there's chemicals coming up through my drain, it's backing up, I live by the creek, look at these chemicals here. I didn't say to them, well, first of all, are you Republican or are you Democrat? Okay? We need to draw the line when people get hurt. And if you look at my website, you'll see my plan for disasters like this, but I want District 6 to know I'm not a one-trick pony. I've already met with, talked with undercover task force for childhood sex trafficking, drug trafficking, labor trafficking. I'm already talking to county commissioners up and down the district on how to improve infrastructure and sewage lines. So when you're in Congress maybe 100 days a year or so, then depending upon how lazy or motivated you are, that really shows who that congressman is going to be, how much work you're going to put in going through your constituents and listening to what they have to say. So let me just end. I won't do the Rowdy Roddy Piper. I usually end with that. I used to say usually end with that. I've been doing this for 8 weeks now. So, but let me just say, they tell me it can't be done. I can't win. I have something that they don't have. I have a grassroots. People are so excited. Everywhere I went today, oh, I've seen you. I know about you. And this was up in Mahoning Valley today. I just, all day I was knocking on doors. I have something. I have a cause. I am not one politician. My other two opponents are leaving seats to get another seat. That's not me. I'm here for a cause. I'm here to bring sanity back. And do you guys all remember they say I don't have the funding. You're all old enough here to remember the the American ragtag amateur team in the Olympics. They went against a Russian team in 1980, and there was unsurmountable odds, and they won. Do you remember what that was called? It was called the Miracle on Ice. On ice. So, when I win this in 2024, and I'm going to win, I'm going to call it the Miracle on Rice. So, thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and it was a great show here, so thank you very much. And that's all I got to say. Yes, yes.
This is much larger than East Palestine, not just the corruption, but this particular event was so toxic across multiple states.
Do you want to say this for a second?
I've
never backed down from a challenge either.
I just wanted to share something real quick because it just really... I was just saying that this is much bigger than East Palestine, so he's got his work cut out for him. But I think it affected not just this area, but multiple states. That plume fanned out over multiple states, as we discussed, and you guys are well aware. I think it's going to affect our food source all across the country, as well as our drinking water. And as I was sitting here drinking this Deer Park water, I turned it around and I looked at the back, and it said, proudly sourced from Frontier Springs, New Tripoli, Pennsylvania, Bangor, Pennsylvania, Foster Township, Pennsylvania, Higgins, Pennsylvania, South Coventry, Pennsylvania, Pine Grove, Pennsylvania, New Manstown, Pennsylvania, Oakland, Maryland, Bloomsbury, New Jersey, and or Wilmsdorf, Pennsylvania. Now, which state got heavily impacted? I just drank 2 of these. I'm a little concerned. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is a huge issue. This is something you have to take to Washington, is to make sure the food and the water is safe. And I know it's a huge responsibility, but I know you can do it.
Okay, well, I will end with this then. First of all, East Palestine is a microcosm of what's going on in the entire nation, in our state. The corruption and lies and deception, it's everywhere. So let me just say, when you ask me if I'm up to the challenge, I think I changed my mind. In the words of the late, great Rowdy Roddy Piper, I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. So. Anybody here saying concludes the day, and thank you very much for coming. Let's win this. Well, you make the campaign contribution to Dr. Rick Chai for Congress. Is it Rick? Oh, hold on 1 second. I guess Tammy's telling me I'm wrong. What is it, Tammy? Rick Chai for Congress. That's good enough. Thank you so much.
He's going to go back to the hotel with us. You're bunking it in.
Okay, we'll talk later then. All right? I have to get there. Still okay. All right, guys. Hope you're still there. I know YouTube flagged our video, but we were able to keep it streaming. So that's the end of this event. Let me see if we could speak to some people. I might just have to change a battery out, so give me a moment.
like 45 minutes.
Are you guys, are you going back to the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll probably see you over there. Alright guys, if you haven't done so already, smash that like button. You can share the stream later or now if you want. I'll try to get some interviews.
I'll be right back. Hi. Yes. So nice to meet you. You guys are awesome. It's online. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Scott. Also, you might want to get Scott. And let me just tell Stephen Les, you're live right now. Yeah. Do you need me right this second?
Oh, if you want to get somebody, yeah. Okay. I'll be right here. Alright guys, let me just get her name. This is Leslie Pacey with the Government Accountability Project. She is the one, she did she was in the documentary before, but earlier today she announced about the 1,500-page report, their findings. So I want to see if she could kind of explain that to me. It's online, but let's see if we get her to explain that now. Also, this trip is not it's not cheap. Between hotels, flights, rental car, staying here for a couple days, me and Lewis, it's been expensive. So if you can, please donate. Go to statuscoup.com/donate. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. Hold on.
I gotta roll. See you later.
Okay. Hey, we met before, right?
Yeah, we did out there.
My name's Sean.
Sean, mine's Rita. Oh, your hands are cold.
Yes, yeah. I had my jacket over before.
I don't want to.
Okay,
if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
Any other time I would,
That's
but
fine. Next trip when I come back, yeah.
that sounds good. I'll look you up.
All right. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too, and thank you, Brad.
Absolutely.
Where's your...
Oh, John. All right, so I think Leslie and Scott are going to come over here. Hope everyone's doing all right.
I just had to do that because I've been trying to get a hold of Dr. Lester.
Right.
All right. Yeah, I mean, where's that bottle of water? I just freaking drank 2 of them.
That was good that you pointed that out, though.
I just drank 2 of these, and they got all this from Pennsylvania.
Right.
Over a year that shit's going in. Yep. I'm sorry, but our government is like blowing all of this off. And this impacts the entire country. Our food source, our water. It sounds like I'm being paranoid, but it's
true.
It's really a big deal. It's so much bigger than you and I realize.
So again, just want to remind you I'm live right now. So if you want to introduce yourself and, and then talk about the report that you announced today.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Leslie Pacey. I'm with the Government Accountability Project. Our organization obtained some FOIA documents from one of the residents. They were on the EPA website. Up until last week, we were not thinking that the railroad had done any testing prior to mid-March on dioxins, and uncovered in this, just buried in this mountain of documents on the website, was 1,500 pages that never went out, never publicly discussed on dioxin sampling. And some of the levels were very high on dioxins in this community, and they knew this. The EPA knew this as early as February 17th.
And so it was a whole month before they started the railroad's testing program. And they knew. And so they kept saying there's nothing to be concerned about with dioxins. And some of the levels were as high as 19 times the action level, where they have to go back in and do retesting, their own action levels. So, and a lot of other nasty chemicals were also found to be quite high. So I feel like they were just not telling the truth, and they were covering it up, and the narrative they were putting out there was contrary to what these lab results show.
Right.
So,
and originally they weren't testing for that.
No,
they were testing for the wrong things.
Right. They originally were testing for a number of chemicals, but they were usually VOCs or SVOCs. There was some testing for hydrochloric acid and phosgene early on. But, the narrative was, you heard it. I don't know if you saw the presentation that Scott Smith did, but he was replaying an old video of Mark Durno from the EPA telling a group of people in a town hall in East Palestine that, we're not concerned about dioxins. We've only decided to test for them because you wanted the tests. It had nothing to do with, we really did kind of find some concerning levels, on site of where the derailment occurred, and we really do need to follow up on that. That's the real narrative.
Right.
Telling people they don't have anything to be concerned about when they're sick, breaking out in rashes, nosebleeds, losing teeth.
And I think I heard, so when I came here last year in February, you mentioned in the documentary, I think, about your nose burning, right?
Yeah.
And, that was something that I experienced as well when I was here.
Yeah. It's really, you know that the event was extremely toxic, right? Multiple chemicals. But in September when I got here, I was really in disbelief that I would feel that bad that quickly. It really scared me, and every cell in my body was like, get out of here. This is not a safe place to be. And yet kids were walking home from school with their backpacks on. And people were living there, and they were stuck there. So it's really sad. I'm a mother of a cancer survivor, and she was part of a cancer cluster in Alabama. So that's how I got into all this work. And it just disgusts me when our government covers up important information that could save lives.
Absolutely.
You expect these multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations to protect their bottom line. That's what they do. We are not shocked by this.
Right.
But when the EPA allows them to do whatever they want to do at the expense of human lives, that's not acceptable.
Absolutely. They're just as guilty as Norfolk Southern.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, they were told, the owner of the vinyl chloride cars, he testified and said 3 times that they didn't need to, there was no threat for the cars to explode, and they didn't need to detonate it.
Right. Usually we want to get mad at the people that make vinyl chloride, but in this instance, they came out and they spoke the truth to the railroad and their contractors, and they were well aware of this, but yet they were still planning on detonating it and didn't get that information to the fire chief.
Right.
So it's, we're working with he's a toxicologist, been around for 50 years. He's written 22 books. His name's Dr. George Thompson. He has been studying this event. He's in retirement, but he's been studying this event for a year, and he estimated that there were about 100 carcinogens formed in this whole event by burning this stuff. Had they just let it, clean up normally, like scoop it up and get it out, I think it was 8 carcinogens. And I have his information in the back, and he's willing to talk to the media. He's ready to get this out. He actually anticipates this is going to be more deaths than 9/11.
Wow.
And what concerns me as well is that widespread plume, the food safety, water safety aspect, and what it's going to do to our whole food source and drinking water source.
Right, and there's tons of farmland around here, and all that went into the air, dropped down into the soil.
Now I'm going to cover up the name of this brand so I don't get in trouble. but if I was drinking 2 bottles of this, I'm a big water drinker. We're all drinking bottled water here, right? So that we don't get sick from the local water, because I don't trust any of it. I think we all take a risk coming here anyway. But I looked at the back of it just for fun, right? I looked at it, and all of this came from Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania was hit, I think, even worse than East Palestine, but it's largely not been tested. So you think about that. And I think we're all being impacted in little ways that we're not going to fully understand unless we really
years from now
push for the testing and make sure that every thing we eat and drink is investigated and protected.
Absolutely.
No one else. And stop these types of things from ever happening again. This cannot happen again.
Right. Thank you very much, Leslie. I
so
appreciate
much.
it. Have a good night. It was nice meeting you.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right, guys, let's see if we go outside and speak with some residents. I got to change the battery here.
He was on Newsmax at the beginning. Remember?
That Steve Hanna was on Newsmax?
Yeah, in the very beginning.
Hopefully the live view doesn't give out.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, guys, the screen's going to go dark for just a second until I change this battery. So give me 1 minute. 1 second. Oh, I got to read out donations. Okay. All right, cool. All right, let me just show you guys the... So this town that we're in is called Columbiana. It is about 15 minutes away from East Palestine. All right, so donations. Let's get to that. By the way, guys, so we just put out, it's actually on Breaking Points, but we produced a little mini documentary about East Palestine and the 1 year, what everything that happened, our reporting trip, photos and interviews from our trips here to East Palestine. We've been here 5 times already. We're gonna keep coming back. The people out here have become like family to us. So we're gonna be back here, a couple months from now. So just staying updated. All right. So super chats. Jordan, $20. Thank you, Jordan. Hey folks, we need your help. If every person watching donates $5 to $10, we will be able to raise enough to offset quite a bit of this trip. If you can chip in, please do. This is our 5th reporting trip to East Palestine. All right, $10 from Chris Garrett. Like Jordan said, you'll never see this on corporate media. Please support independent media. Keep up the coverage. Status Coup. Thank you, Chris. Teresa 273, $5. New member, Ellen Mass and Bruce. Welcome, Ellen. Welcome, Bruce. All right, website donations. $50 from Donya. Sorry. $50 from Donya. You guys are freaking awesome. I talk about you everywhere to everyone. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Donya. And $5 from Monica. Thank you, Monica. It's a little chilly out here. It was a beautiful day out today. So we have a whole bunch of clips, videos, interviews that we did the past couple of days. I filmed some stuff today where they did a ritual. I forgot what it was called. It was called "We Will Not Die" or something like that. It was a very cool ritual. They had activists from all over the country come and speak to the residents here in East Palestine. Then they planted like this the sculpture in Darren and Stella's yard. You guys are familiar with them. We've interviewed them. We spoke with them a couple of times. So we'll have that footage up within the next couple of days. What else? So go check out the documentary. It's the mini doc on breaking points. I believe Jordan shared it on the Status Coup YouTube channel. We didn't post it on the Status Coup YouTube channel, but we shared the link. So go check that out. What else? Yeah, just want to thank you guys for making this possible. You know, it's appreciated by so many people. You know, the residents here, like I said before, they have become our family, and I'm sure they see us the same way. You know, they welcome us into their homes, into their lives. You know, spend time with their families, their kids. So the work that we're doing here at Status Coup is so important, and we cannot do this without members, without donations, without super chats. So please, you know, keep at it, keep us on the ground, keep us doing what we're doing, because you know that corporate media is not going to do what we're doing. So I don't have much battery on this live stream. There are not many people inside. It's late. Everybody's tired. So I'm going to get back to the hotel. I got a flight back tomorrow. But thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for the super chats, donations. We really appreciate it.